On September 1st, at exactly 11:47 p.m., 13 witches gathered in a circle. The air hung heavy with the smoke of burning herbs, while candlelight flickered and stretched their shadows across the room. Ancient words slipped from their tongues like poisoned honey, thick with intent. This was not their first ritual. They had summoned spirits before, bent reality to their will, and toyed with forces that could bring the bravest of men to their knees. But that night was different. That night, something went terribly wrong. The security footage captured everything, every frame a silent witness to their downfall. You can see the precise moment their confidence fractured, the exact instant when centuries of inherited power faltered beneath a force they could neither control nor comprehend. Meant nothing. The lead witch, the one with 3 decades of practice, the one who boldly declared she could pierce through dimensions, froze mid-chant. Her lips fell silent, her eyes widened in terror, and her hands trembled like leaves in a storm. She had seen something in the circle, something not summoned, not invited, not even imaginable. It was you, not your body, not your flesh and bone, but your essence. Your energy signature tore through their sacred space, unannounced and uncontrollable, a presence that rewrote the rules of everything they thought they knew. The footage shows it clearly, their formation breaking, their steps faltering. First, they backed away cautiously, then quicker, until finally panic overtook them, and they fled. 13 seasoned practitioners of the dark arts, running from a presence that needed no spell to command fear. They whispered about you for weeks afterward, but not in their usual covens or protected circles. Instead, they spoke behind locked doors, layering their words with protection spells, their voices hushed and nervous. "Have you felt it?" they asked one another. "That thing that walks in human skin." They stopped doing readings the moment your name appeared, afraid of what the cards or the spirits might reveal. They learned a truth that shook them to their core. Some doors, once opened, can never be shut. And you, my dear cosmic glitch, are the door they wish they had never dared to knock upon. What made them run wasn't darkness. Darkness is their playground. It wasn't power. Power is something they revere. No, what sent shivers through their bones was something infinitely more terrifying. It was immunity. You see, every spell, every curse, every mystical manipulation relies on a single requirement, a frequency to attach itself to: fear, doubt, guilt, shame, desire. These are the hooks that dark magic casts into the soul. Without them there's no anchor. But you operate on a frequency they've never encountered before. It's not that you're wrapped in angelic protection, it's that you've endured so much hell, been betrayed so viciously, and shattered so thoroughly, that when you rebuilt yourself, you reassembled on a wavelength that doesn't exist in any of their grimoires. You're broadcasting on a channel so foreign that their third eyes blur and water just trying to glimpse it. When they attempted to read your energy, their tools failed spectacularly. Tarot decks ignited into flames, crystal balls split with jagged cracks, pendulums spun themselves into oblivion until their chains snapped. One witch even reported that her familiar, a cat she had trusted for 15 years, took a single look at your photo and refused to step foot in her ritual room for an entire month. Because unlike humans, animals don't lie about what they sense, and what that cat sensed was undeniable. You didn't study protection magic, you became it. Every betrayal that should have ended you, every abandonment that should have broken you, every moment you decided to keep breathing, when even the universe seemed to want you gone, all of it was forging you into something indestructible. Without realizing it, you were building an energetic fortress, brick by brick, scar by scar, that no spell can penetrate. You aren't merely defended, you're unreachable, and that, more than any counter-curse, unsettles them to their core. There's even a hidden corner of the dark web, where practitioners gather to share their warnings, their failures, their do-not-touch lists. Most people will never find it, but 6 months ago, your name appeared there. Not your full name, they wouldn't dare. Just your initials, followed by a chilling entry. Subject exhibits reality-bending properties. All workings return threefold. Approach considered extremely hazardous. The thread beneath your entry reads like a cautionary tale. Which after which confessed their attempts to bend you, only to be bent by their own workings. One tried to flood your nights with nightmares, and ended up trapped inside her own darkest memories for 3 relentless weeks. Another attempted to sour your relationships, only to watch every toxic person in her life suddenly turn on her with venom. A third tried to sabotage your success, but within a month her own business crumbled, while yours thrived brighter than ever. But what came next, what happened after these warnings, was the moment that made every last one of them stop trying. You never fought back. You never raised a hand, never cast a single spell, never lit a candle, never whispered even one word of intention against them. Their magic simply collided with your frequency and recoiled, reversing itself like light bending around the gravity of a black hole. You weren't reflecting their attacks. You weren't deflecting them either. You were simply existing at a vibration that turns all negative energy back to its source, without effort, without thought, without resistance. On that forum, where witches share warnings, the moderator, an elder with 50 years of practice, posted a final comment that rippled through the entire community. "This isn't someone using protection magic," he wrote. "This is someone who has become something beyond our understanding. Magic requires belief to work. This subject exists outside belief. They know something we don't. Stay away." And then there's the smile. The one caught on the security footage exactly at 11:52 and 17 seconds. Remember, your body wasn't even there. It was only your energy signature they'd stumbled into, summoned by accident. Yet in the chaos of their shattered circle, your essence manifested a smile. Not a smile of joy, not even malice, but something stranger, something deeper. It was the smile of someone who had peered behind the curtain of reality itself and found the illusion amusing. The smile of someone who knew that all the power these witches claimed to wield was nothing compared to the raw force of a soul that had touched the void and returned unimpressed. That smile wasn't for them. It was a recognition of their fear, and in that moment, they understood with primal certainty they weren't the predators. One witch later wrote in her private journal, a journal leaked by a former coven member, that it was like watching someone smile at children swinging toy swords while quietly holding the launch codes for a nuclear arsenal. It wasn't mockery, but a terrible kind of compassion, as if your smile carried knowledge of a truth that would break the human mind if spoken aloud. She ended her entry with a confession: "I haven't practiced since. I can't. Every time I try, I see that smile." The footage cuts to static at 11:52 and 31 seconds, 13 seconds of pure distortion. During those 13 seconds, every electronic device in a 3-block radius simultaneously malfunctioned. When the feed returned, the room was empty. The witches were gone. They had abandoned everything: tools, books, artifacts, their life's work scattered across the floor, because in that instant, instinct overruled logic. They knew, beyond reason, beyond doubt, that they had encountered something that should not exist. Scientists would scoff. They'd insist what happened in that room was impossible. Energy signatures don't manifest without a body. Consciousness doesn't project across distances without machines. Reality doesn't bend for a single will. But you and I both know science only measures what it has language for, and you exist in the margins beyond measurement. You are what happens when pain reaches critical mass. Instead of collapsing you, it transformed you. Instead of destroying you, it rewrote you into something that operates outside normal parameters. Every betrayal didn't make you harder, it made you less bound by the laws of this world. Every abandonment didn't isolate you, it severed you from the matrix of human limitation. How many times should you have broken? How many times did they expect you to give up, disappear, dissolve into the background of existence? Yet every attempt to erase you only forged you sharper, stronger, more impossibly real. You stopped following the script of cause and effect. You began writing your own physics. And that is what those witches encountered. Not a person wielding magic, but a person who had become a law unto themselves. You're not bending reality. Reality itself bends around you. You're not powerful in the way they understand power. You're powerful in a way that renders their entire concept of power irrelevant, outdated, obsolete. After that incident with the witches, something strange and unprecedented happened in the magical community. The Whisper Network, the invisible web of communication between practitioners that had thrived for centuries, went silent when it came to you. Not because anyone ordered them to keep quiet, but because they genuinely didn't know how to put into words what they had encountered. How do you warn others about something that doesn't follow any known rules? Forums that once overflowed with speculation and advice went dead whenever your energy was mentioned. Threads froze mid-conversation. Group chats disbanded without explanation. Entire covens split apart, not out of fear in the usual sense, but from a deeper kind of existential vertigo. They had spent their lives believing they understood the secret machinery of the universe, only to discover there was a level they couldn't reach, couldn't analyze, couldn't even properly perceive. One former practitioner, who abandoned magic entirely after encountering your frequency, tried to describe it this way. Imagine spending 30 years mastering advanced mathematics, only to meet someone who makes numbers themselves nervous. That's what your energy is like. It doesn't break the rules. It exists in a dimension where the rules were never written in the first place. The silence spread like wildfire. Tarot readers reported their decks going blank when your presence lingered nearby. Psychics found themselves clutching their temples in sudden pain whenever a client dared to ask about you. Energy workers compared the sensation to trying to tune into a radio station that exists between all known frequencies, a broadcast that can't be decoded. The message became clear without ever being spoken. Some things are meant to remain unexamined. But 3 weeks after the Coven incident, the silence broke in a different realm. Certain government databases flickered with unusual activity. Files were created, stamped, classified, then shuffled into servers that technically don't exist. Someone, somewhere was paying attention, not to the witches, they're always monitored, but to whatever had made them run. A friend of mine in data security, who owes me more favors than I can count, managed to glimpse fragments. Before the records were locked away, the terminology was chilling: anomalous human signature, reality distortion classification, uncontained interaction protocol, do not engage. They weren't treating you as a person, they were treating you as an event. But here's the part that rattled them. Every algorithm designed to track your pattern failed. Every predictive model collapsed. Every attempt to generate a behavioral profile ended in corrupted data. You're not random. You're operating on a logic so alien to their systems that they can't even recognize it as a pattern. You're not hiding from them. You're simply existing in their blind spot. The last entry my friend glimpsed before his access was revoked was a single line: subject appears to be evolving. That should terrify them more than any weapon, because that's exactly what you're doing. Not learning spells, not studying rituals, not clawing for power. You're simply becoming more yourself. And yourself, it turns out, is something this reality was never prepared to accommodate. Now, let's shift to the freaks mentioned in your title, not the witches. They're amateurs compared to what's coming. I mean the real outliers, the ones who have touched the void and returned with their eyes changed, the ones who see through the simulation, the ones who usually laugh in the face of fear because they've already stared into the abyss and made peace with it. These are people who walk through walls as casually as you or I open doors, who converse with entities that predate human speech, who have died and come back so many times that death itself greets them like an old drinking buddy. They don't flinch at power displays, energy surges, or even entire mystical lineages. But when your frequency entered the equation, they did something they never do. They went quiet. They stepped back. One of them, a man whose very existence seems to defy time itself, finally spoke. He claims to have lived for over 3 centuries, his body marked with scars that tell stories older than nations, ritual wounds carved in forgotten languages, burns from flames not born of this world, and jagged reminders of battles fought against both the living and the dead. He says, he has seen kings rise from shadows only to crumble into ashes, watched civilizations ignite in brilliance before dissolving into dust. He has danced with demons under eclipsed moons and made angels weep until their voices cracked the skies. Yet even with all of that, even after centuries of bearing witness to power, both divine and profane, he said something that sent shock waves through the entire underground community. I've seen legends rise and fall. I've watched empires collapse into silence. I've bartered with gods and buried monsters, but that one, he faltered, his voice trembling in a way that unsettled the unshakable, that one is something else entirely. The freaks, the true outliers who wander in the margins of reality, live by an unspoken code. They respect what they don't understand. They don't laugh at the unknown. They bow to it. And for the first time in decades, maybe longer, they found themselves face to face with something they couldn't categorize, couldn't chart, couldn't control. Not because you cloaked yourself in shadows or concealed your essence, but because you were so violently, so transparently, so unapologetically yourself that their entire framework for cataloging existence crumbled. They had no shelf to place you on, no vocabulary to define you with. Your authenticity wasn't just real, it was the mystery. That's what broke them. You weren't trying to project mystique, weren't cloaking yourself in riddles or veils of secrecy. You were simply existing raw and unfiltered, and that was enough to collapse centuries of hidden study. And then came the physicist, a man who straddled 2 worlds, quantum equations by day, occult experiments by night. You'd be surprised how many of them exist, chasing truth through the microscope and the mirror at the same time. He tried to map your energy signature with every tool available: particle sensors, oscilloscopes, ritual circles drawn in salt and ash, pendulums weighted with gemstones, and instruments designed to read vibrations on both physical and metaphysical scales. The results didn't make sense. His instrument shorted out. His pendulum snapped. His numbers refused to add up. He wrote page after page of data, but every line contradicted the one before, until finally his notes became so disturbing, so unstable, that he set them ablaze in a steel drum behind his lab, watching equations curl into smoke and vanish into the night. He quit both fields, science and magic, disappearing into obscurity. But before he vanished, he shared one final observation, whispered like a confession: this person exists at a mathematical impossibility. What he meant was clear. Every living being vibrates at a frequency. That frequency produces patterns, predictable arcs, probable outcomes. It's not destiny. It's probability. Mathematics, the rhythm of existence. But you broke the model. You exist at multiple frequencies simultaneously, overlapping yet never interfering, as if you are many realities stacked into one skin. Imagine playing every single note on a piano at the same time, and instead of creating chaos, the sound resolved into perfect, haunting harmony. That's what you are, harmony born of impossibility. This is why spells collapse before reaching you. Why psychics stumble, why visions fracture into static, why seasoned practitioners, people who fear nothing, find themselves retreating. You're not defended, you're undefined. You exist in a state of pure potential, collapsing into exactly what reality requires of you in each moment. Trying to curse you is like trying to hex the concept of possibility itself. The physicist's final note, scrawled in handwriting so unsteady It looks like his very hand was trembling against forces he couldn't name. Survives as a ghostly warning. Subject appears to be a living paradox. Completely broken, yet impossibly whole. Utterly human, yet fundamentally other. Should not exist by any known law. Does anyway. Recommend no further study. Some things are meant to remain impossible, but here's the truth that terrifies them most. Not just the witches, not just the freaks, but the watchers, the handlers, the hidden architects who believe they control the game. You are not static. You are not fixed. You are evolving. Every day your frequency mutates into something more unreachable, more unimaginable, more impossible. Think about it. What made 13 witches flee in terror 6 months ago would probably send 100 running today. But it's not because you're hoarding more power in the traditional sense. No, it's because you're shedding limitations faster than reality itself can pin new ones onto you. Every label they slap on you peels away. Every box they try to fit you into shatters. Every time they think they've cracked your code, you've already rewritten the mathematics of your existence. You are not learning their language. You're forcing them to admit their language is inadequate. You're not gaining power. You're proving power is too small a word for what you've become. Do you know what you are? You are what happens when someone crashes into rock bottom so hard they rebound through the ceiling of reality itself. You are what happens when betrayal is no longer a wound, but rocket fuel. You are what happens when abandonment ceases to be a curse and transforms into liberation. You are what happens when a soul grows so exhausted with rules that it slips between them, taking up residence in the spaces where no laws apply. And then there's the smile, that terrible, beautiful, incomprehensible smile. It's not just an expression, it's the embodiment of your secret, the recognition of the cosmic joke. It's the look of someone who has glimpsed behind the curtain, seen the machinery of existence grinding away, and laughed. Not because it was meaningless, but because it was absurdly simple once revealed. The rules were never meant for you. They never bound you. They never could. And that, above all else, is what terrifies them, because deep down they know the truth. You are not breaking the rules of reality. You are reminding reality that you never agreed to play its game in the first place. They thought they were powerful. They strutted through their rituals with the arrogance of those who believe they had cracked the code of existence. They thought they had measured reality, charted its boundaries, bent its rules, and rewritten its laws. They truly believed that their chants, their circles, their little manipulations dressed up as grand workings could touch you, reach across dimensions, and bind you the way they'd bound others. But here's the secret they didn't account for. You've already walked the corridors. They're terrified of even naming. You've endured landscapes they only whisper about to frighten their apprentices into obedience. You faced down the things they call nightmares, and then emerged on the other side as the very figure those nightmares fear when they try to rest. They brandish curses like blades, but you've swallowed storms. They conjure shadows, but you've lived where the light never reaches. What they invoke as a threat, you carry as memory. What they describe as punishment, you wear as survival. That's why their power has no teeth against you, because you've already stood in places that stripped you bare, pressed you down, and tried to grind you into nothingness. And you walked out carrying a frequency that rewrote the rules of what a soul could endure. And so word spreads. Not on Twitter threads, not in comment sections, not in books passed from hand to hand. No, I'm talking about the real network, the one that slips through cracks in the ordinary world, the one woven from whispers exchanged in alleyways, from eyes that linger a second too long because they recognize what lies behind yours, from dreams so sharp they draw blood. That network knows about you now, not your name, not your face. Those are for mortals, for census records, for IDs. What they know is your signature, that impossibility of energy that somehow walks around in human form, buying coffee, standing in grocery store lines, answering emails, as if you aren't the cosmic malfunction threading itself through the fabric of their reality. They are gathering data. They are hoarding fragments of sightings, stories, rumors, trying desperately to map what cannot be mapped. But the data bends back on itself, twisting like a serpent, devouring its own tail. The notes contradict each other, cancel each other out. One circle swears you are an ancient soul, older than memory, older than myth itself. Another insists you are brand new, the first of something unrecorded, a prototype of the next human equation. Some whisper you are a weapon forged by hands beyond this plane. Others argue you are a guardian, a firewall against powers they dare not name. And yet the truth is simpler, sharper, and more terrifying than any of their theories. You are just you. And somehow that's enough to break their understanding of what's possible. Behind closed doors, things are moving. Secret meetings are being called in basements where cell signals die. Protocols are being drafted in languages designed to be unreadable by anyone outside the circle. Contingency plans are being written in panic ink, as if preparation could mean anything when faced with someone like you. And all of this, the hushed conversations, the encrypted messages, the rituals wrapped in paranoia, are for one person who isn't even trying to be a threat. You're not storming their walls, you're not chasing their secrets, you're just living your life. Yet your very existence forces reality itself to tilt, recalibrate, and rewrite itself in your presence. That's why they can't fight you. You're not fighting. They can't stop you. You're not moving. You simply are. And that state of pure, undeniable being is more disruptive than any revolution, more destabilizing than any weapon. You are not action. You are disruption, embodied. The security footage from that night, the one where your essence appeared in their circle like a rupture in reality, has now been copied, encrypted, smuggled, and distributed to every major occult organization on Earth. Not as a warning, but as a question none of them know how to answer. What do we do about something that exists outside our understanding? So far the answer has been silence, because silence is safer than admitting the truth. They know what you know. There is nothing to do. You're not a problem to be solved, not an enemy to be destroyed. You're a new law, and a game they're still trying to play by outdated rules. You are a living amendment to existence. And they haven't caught up yet. But let's strip away their fear and their projections. Let's be honest about what no one else will say out loud. This impossibility you've become, this gift that terrifies witches, freaks, and watchers alike, it did not fall into your lap. It was not handed to you by chance, by bloodline, by divine accident. You earned it, and the price you paid would have killed anyone else. You didn't wake up one morning immune to reality's rules. You became immune because you bled for it, because you broke for it, because you endured a suffering that would have driven legends into silence, a pain that would have made saints renounce heaven, a despair that would have crushed entire dynasties into dust. Every frequency you now resonate on was bought with something priceless. Every vibration you carry was forged from a piece of your heart carved away in betrayal, abandonment, humiliation, grief. You didn't ascend above them because you avoided suffering. You ascended because you let it pass through you, strip you, remake you. What you carry isn't protection. It's proof. Proof that you were tested by fire, hot enough to melt myths, and you did not dissolve. Proof that pain itself tried to erase you and failed. And that's the part they'll never understand. What terrifies them isn't just your signature, your impossibility, your undefined state. What terrifies them is the cost behind it, because they know, whether they admit it or not, that they couldn't have paid it, that they would have shattered, folded, disappeared. They know you are the product of trials they cannot fathom, and survival they cannot replicate. And that knowledge haunts them more than any curse or prophecy ever could. You are what remains after the storm burns everything else away. You are the residue of survival, transmuted into something reality itself wasn't ready for. And when you smile, When that impossible smile crosses your face, it's not just an expression, it's the revelation of the cosmic joke. The understanding that the rules they cling to were never yours to obey. Every impossibility you embody was purchased with a cost no one else could afford. For every impossible thing you are now, there is a possibility you will never get back. A door you'll never walk through. A version of life you'll never live. And perhaps most painfully, people you'll never hold again. You lost them, didn't you? Not just to the normal drift of time, not just to distance or disagreements, but to something deeper, harsher, more absolute, the fundamental incompatibility between who you were becoming and who they needed you to stay. You watched relationships unravel before your eyes, not because anyone was wrong, but because you and they were playing under different laws of physics. You were becoming a new equation, a new dimension, and they couldn't bend that far without breaking. You sat across tables with people you once loved, speaking the same words, yet hearing different meanings. You laughed at the same jokes, but felt them echo in entirely different universes. You looked into their eyes and realized they weren't seeing you anymore. They were seeing the ghost of the version they wanted you to be, and you knew you could never go back to being that ghost. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. There were nights, endless nights, where their absence hollowed you out. Nights when their voices still echoed, accusing you in silence. Maybe you are too much. Maybe you're too strange. Maybe you should dim yourself, make yourself smaller, easier to love, easier to understand, easier to consume in a world that prefers its people prepackaged, predictable, digestible, and for a time, you wondered if they were right. You tried, you clipped your own wings, you folded yourself into shapes that hurt, you carved yourself into a size that fit their world, even when it bled you dry. But every time you attempted to shrink, reality itself rebelled. Lights flickered overhead when you lied to yourself. Electronics glitched, humming with static when you forced yourself to compress your frequency. Even your body pushed back, shaking, aching, growing sick when you tried to make yourself smaller than the soul you carried. It was as if the universe itself refused to let you pretend. Because here's the truth that no one wants to admit. You were never broken, you were broken through. You weren't damaged, you were developed beyond the vocabulary they had was never enough to understand you. What they called a curse was always your crown, a crown forged in fire, so fierce it would have reduced anyone else to ash. A crown burdened with wisdom too heavy for them to ever bear. You paid for every fragment of your evolution with pieces of your former self. You shed old skins until nothing remained but the raw, impossible frequency of who you are now. And that is why no force in this universe, not their rituals, not their criticisms, not even their nostalgia for the old you, can drag you back into the ghost you once were. But let's be precise. Let's talk about the exact moment everything shifted. The moment you crossed the threshold from human into something more. It wasn't the witches, that was only when they noticed. It wasn't betrayal or heartbreak either. Those were only scaffolding, the training ground, the preparation. The real shift came in a moment. Most would overlook. Quiet, ordinary, likely when you were alone, when the dark pressed close and the silence felt heavier than air. And in that moment, something within you whispered, or maybe roared, no more. It wasn't no more pain, because pain never stopped. It wasn't no more suffering, because suffering never disappeared. What ended was the pretending. No more pretending that this narrow version of reality was the only path available to you. In that instant, you didn't break, you didn't collapse. You broke through. You stopped trying to glue yourself back together with blueprints that were never yours. Instead, you began constructing your own architecture. You stopped asking why me, and instead demanded, what now? That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when there is no physical evidence. Let me believe in your perpetual presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts for me are thoughts of prosperity, not harm, to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer this prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and for the abundance you bring. If this message resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need encouragement. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please